if you'd like to take a chair with you.
I'll take my chair with me.
Thank you so much. Wow. As Jonas said, the last session, and it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it because there's been loads of stories that resonated with me as somebody who's managed rebates. Some great stories of success, some more stories that still require the need for therapy. But we've all been there, and that's the great thing about this room. We're rebate professionals together. We're a community. And so when I put up the next slide, I'm hoping you're all going to agree with me. I love rebates. Who here loves rebates? Okay, I saw about half the room. That is because I honestly believe it is a love-hate relationship. It's something that we know we're changing the narrative. And I've started, you mentioned evangelist. I didn't know there could be such a thing. One, as an evangelist, I didn't know what that was. Still trying to work it out. Secondly, a rebate evangelist, of all things. So I've got to love rebates, but I genuinely do. And then my personal mission is to change the world one rebate at a time. And so today, let's see if we can't change some rebates. We're going to start with a rebate that we see very often. Does this demand profile look popular? Or not even, it's not even popular, we don't like it, but it's what we do. Customer trades, or we buy throughout the year. We get towards the end of the year and we're like, we've got targets to hit. So we buy loads of products. And then we get to the beginning of the following year and we hardly buy anything at all. What we call that is the Great Rebate Rush. Supply chains hate this. They absolutely despise it. It's not good for efficiency. And to be honest, as a distributor, it was no good for us because our poor warehouse guys, they didn't know what day it was for the first couple of months of the following year. And to mention, we broke most of the product that we bought because we were stocking it and shelving it in the wrong places. It's not good for anybody. Today, we're going to solve that problem. But before we get there, we've got to think, how would we solve these things? Because I don't want to just show you how to solve this. I want to show you how to solve lots of things. So we're going to look at Formula One. We're going to look at racing because they do what they do really, really well. They are at the pinnacle of performance. And I think we can learn a little thing from them. And so to do this, we're going to try and make this a little bit interactive. And what we're going to do is we're going to think about so we don't negotiate all of the rebates in this room. We've got lots of colleagues doing this for us. So let's think about how we work with them through the lens of Formula One. So firstly, could I have a volunteer from this table? I just need somebody's name. Who wants to be? Sean. Okay, we've got Sean. And then from this table, who wants to be in my other Formula One team? Anybody? Yes? Michael. So we've got Sean and Michael. Okay. So, Sean, the good news is, for you, you're going to be in a Formula One team run by Formula One people. Michael, got bad news. You're going to be in a Formula One team run by rebate people, okay? So, let's picture this. It's an hour before the race, okay? So you're getting your prep. Start with you, Michael. You're getting there, you're getting ready, you're like, hey Mark, how am I going to win this race? Good news is I've got some advice for you. Drive as fast as you can. You're going to nail it. Michael, you come along. Different team. We tell you, well, the reality is the way this track is configured, the car is going to be faster in the second half of the race. So what we need you to do is to preserve your tyres in the first half of the race. You're going to be slow in turn 3, so take a wider angle and block them off. That's our strategy. And we go on for a little while, and you're like, right, brilliant. I know, I've got a strategy. I know what I'm going to do. Michael, I'm still not holding out much hope for your strategy, but when we think about salespeople, do we say, here's everything you need to shape and craft rebates? Or do we say, just drive as fast as you can? Are we doing enough to educate the people negotiating these rebates? Or actually, are we standing back and going, we shouldn't have done that? I wouldn't have done that. And because it's not easy what we do. There's a reason they make it complicated at times. It's because they think complicated is the best way. There's a time when also they make it simple because maybe they just don't know a different way at all. So we think of Formula One. And so we've started the race. The good news, Sean, is you're doing well. You're in 3rd place. I get on the comms, I give you the brief. You know exactly what you need to be doing. I've been telling you, you're a bit hard on the brakes in turns 4 and 6. And by the way, your main competition, they've got an electrical fault. It's all good for you. Michael, good news is, I've sent you a spreadsheet. Don't you worry. You'll be there, spreadsheet. I know exactly what I need to do with my racing strategy. No. Unfortunately, we've conditioned a lot of our stakeholders to think that if we send them information, we send them spreadsheets, they'll know what to do. So what is the learning from this? The learning is, when I spoke to Sean, I didn't give Sean lots and lots of information. What I did was I gave him something that is really valuable. And I've got to go to that side of the stage now because I've got my clicker. What that is something I like to think of as wisdom. And I would challenge us as a room to think, how much wisdom are we giving to our stakeholders, to our decision makers? Bearing in mind, a spreadsheet is not wisdom. I love this, this model because it's so easy to picture. We'll stay in the theme of Formula One. If we think of Sean driving around the track, the first thing we get from that car, because these cars produce massive amounts of data, so much data, and Andrew and various people today have talked about how much data we've got and the AI that's helping. That data is just ones and zeros. At that point, it's not telling us anything that's going to help us win the race. The next thing we get after data is information. Information could be our lap times, our brake temperatures, the racing lines we're taking. Having that information still doesn't help us win a race. We don't send to Sean what his brake temperatures are and things like that. What we do is this information is probably still behind the scenes. If you ever watch a race, we probably still don't see that. We do see the next step, knowledge. What do we know? We know that on turn 3, we are slower than our competition. We know on turn 3 that Sean brakes at a different point to all the other drivers. We know that if Sean was to change his braking point, he would go round turn 3 faster. When we know multiple things and we put them together, we have wisdom. Wisdom means I can say to Sean, just brake 10 yards later into turn 3. I don't need to tell him anything else. And that helps him win the race. Are we doing that for the people negotiating our rebates, or are we overloading them? Are we actually giving them wisdom? Are we saying, we know when you target a customer for this, this happens. We know that if you put 2% on the table, it's not enough, but if you put 2.5 on, it is, and if you put 3 on, you're just wasting money. What do we know? Because we've got loads of data, but have we actually got to wisdom? And so with that in mind, this is a very giving presentation. Thank you for your participation. A racing car. Unfortunately, there's no instructions in that one. But we know this is a people game. And Chris, I didn't see your slides earlier. So when you started talking about generations, I was thinking, oh boy, we're going to overlap here, and I'm just going to repeat your message. Thankfully, it's teed it up perfectly. So when we think about what we're trying to do here with rebates, it's a people game, because businesses are not really making decisions. It's the people within the businesses that are making decisions. Two people negotiate, and then there's somebody somewhere who decides whether we buy something or we don't. Well, that's changing, as Chris mentioned. And how is it changing? I actually went a generation earlier, because I think the generation earlier created half the rebate schemes that we're still giving us headaches. This generation, what are they defined by? Growth and security. If you ask AI, that's what it tells you, by the way, growth and security. They grew up in times where growth was a given. They grew up in times where you didn't really have to worry about risk. Just everything was great. So what do we get when we see rebates that are a bit old? Growth, more growth. We'd like some growth. And if we could get some extra growth on top of that, I'd love some growth. But we know in modern economic times, growth is not always possible. So now we have our Ys and Zs. I cut out the X's because we were just in the middle, just along for the ride. We didn't really know what to do. We didn't have rebate management software for sure. So yeah, this is the spreadsheet brigade right in the middle. These guys, the Ys and the Zs, have looked back and gone, what on earth are you doing? There's lots of words to describe, and actually disruptors was one of them. They challenged, they're like, well, why are you working so hard? Why aren't we, as well, another word that got put in here was collaboration. They really want to be collaborative. Boomers, no chance. What's in it for me? Growth, growth, growth. That's the generation they grew up in. These guys, they all want to play nice. We all want to look after the planet. They ride on these scooter things. Yeah. But just think about who you're doing business with. Because if you're going to one of these people and just going, I want growth, I want growth, I want growth, are you actually going to get their attention? Are you actually going to get what you want out of the relationship with them? So that's really important. The other thing is, when you've worked out who you're dealing with and what's important to them, this was mentioned earlier, what do you want? So this can work both ways. You can think about what do I want, but also what does my trading partner want? I'm very proud, and I love this, growth isn't on there. Because for me, growth is actually just it's demand. And demand, you actually might want demand to go up, you might want demand to go down, you might want demand to be consistent. But there's lots of other things you can be negotiating other than growth. Especially bearing in mind the scooter brigade might not be interested in growth. They might be more interested in some more collaborative elements. Because remember, growth generally means the more business we do, the less money one side makes in a margin. So I would say have a look at, and this is just a short list of things you can have in your trading agreements beyond just growth. We mentioned earlier, Ron, you mentioned about having people trained. So I've got there at the end enablement. Are your employees trained to sell your supplier's products effectively? Some suppliers will pay you money, as Ron highlighted, to be trained and sell their products. There's things like logistics. In your operations, are you submitting multiple orders a week when actually you might be able to consolidate them into one order and they'll reward you for that? Administration, what's your invoice matching rate? Turn around to your supplier and say, hey, we're at 90%. What's it worth to you if we were at 95%? If we don't get there, you don't pay us anything. But if we do, what's it worth to you? There's lots of things here that ideally are these win-win scenarios. You ask, what's it worth to you? If they can give you an answer, then you've got a number to start working with. And likewise, if you're selling, you can look at these things. You can definitely calculate what it's worth to you. And you can say to the customer, well, if you want a cheaper price, potentially you could do one of these things for us. And it becomes a win-win because these things make you more money. So we've established that the generation's shifting. We've established that there are more things than just growth when it comes to the world of rebate. The other thing we've got to consider is then, what is the rate of rebate that we're going to offer? What is the size of the reward? And I see a lot of 5% for $1 million and those kind of rebates. We're going to go through a bit of maths later. That's the bit I get the most excited about as an accountant, so get ready for that. But now we're just going to do a little bit of theory. And I was talking earlier, and to our wonderful cameraman who's doing a great job over there. And I'm going to actually use this as a scenario for how do you get the most bang for your buck? Because whether you're paying for something or you're incentivizing something, it's all kind of the same thing. You'd think that the more money you put on the table, the more performance you get. So we would think it's a nice, easy line. But if we think about hiring a cameraman for the day, and I'm going to make these numbers up, so don't hold him to this. And forget that it's a picture of a house, because I've just changed the scenario just on the day. Okay, that's how much. So this is, I'm going to get the cameraman for a day to take photos of my house. I don't know why, that's what I wanted him to do. And it's $3,000. That's what I'm told is a good price to get a cameraman for the day to just take pictures of my house. If I thought, well, I don't want to pay that much. I want to pay $1,000. If I pay $1,000, it's not going to go up the line. I'm not going to get a cameraman to come and do it. I've put $1,000 on the table. Maybe somebody will turn up with an iPhone and just take some photos of my house. If you want that, by the way, I'll happily do that for $1,000. If I put $2,000 on the table, I'm now talking. Somebody might entertain what I want them to do. $3,000 were good. $4,000, getting much better. I'm now paying top end, camera job. If I put $5,000 on the table, I've put a lot more money on the table, but the performance hasn't massively improved. When it comes to incentives, it's not a straight line, it's an S. So when you're trying to work out what rebate rate should I be offering my customer, you've got to think, I want my rebates and my targets for my rebates to be there. I want my rebates to where I get the most bang for the buck. Every extra dollar I put on the table, I get the maximum amount of performance. You can do this. We've just worked out what it's going to cost and how it looks to take photos of my house. We know we've got lots of data. You can even sample this and work it out, and even just talk to your customer and say, hey, what's it going to take for this? What's it going to take for that? But what you will find is you do not want to be doing that bit. And you definitely don't want to be giving away money for free. You want to find that sweet spot. When you find that sweet spot, that's where you tier it up. So that the customer, it's not a pass or fail. It's if they're having a bad year, there's still something to go after. If they're having a great year, there's still something else to achieve. Good rebates are incentives. So you want to make sure the customer is always incentivized. Likewise, if you're buying, you want to be able to create these what-if scenarios. Don't just tolerate, well, actually, we spent 10 million, so we're going to set a target for 11. Ask them, what if this? What if this? Just see what's on the table. And so that is how we get the most bang for our buck. Now, this is the exciting bit. This is the numbers. I have got a manufacturer and a distributor. And I do apologize for anybody who's probably a Gen Z, because we're talking about printers. So there's loads of examples of this. And as an example, one, I bought the shoes yesterday. I was surprised they didn't offer me socks or shoe polish. But we know that generally the add-on item is where the margin is. So it's a great thing to target with a rebate scheme. So we're going to use printers. We know in the older world of printers, the cartridges cost more than the printers themselves. And thank goodness for the internet, where you can actually go on and buy the cheaper versions of the cartridges not made by the manufacturers. However, the manufacturers want you to buy the printer and they want you to buy the cartridge. More importantly, the manufacturer doesn't sell you the printer, their distributor sells you the printer. So a smart manufacturer will target the distributor to sell cartridges as well. So what we've got here is, and I'm going to make up names, Sharon and Bob. So Sharon makes and sells printers, Bob distributes them. Let's have a look at some numbers. So what we've got here is Sharon's making just over 30% margin. And then on this side, poor Bob, oh dear. I know I've felt this before because I've been a distributor. We never made as much as the manufacturers. Bob's only making just under 13%. Bob has been told, unless that number goes up, you might as well go and find another job. So, you know, the printer world is a cutthroat environment, like many. And so Bob's like, what am I going to do? The good news for Bob is that he spoke to Sharon. Sharon's a switched on rebate strategist. That's what Sharon did to Bob's numbers. Went from 12.8 to 18. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mark's an accountant, and we're very good at cooking books. I assure you there is nothing untoward in these numbers. The difference is Sharon's given Bob a 6% rebate. So you'd say, well, that's not going to be good for Sharon. Well, these are Sharon's numbers. Sharon's margin stayed flat, 30.6, and she's paid out this 6% rebate. How was she able to do this? Because before, the way Bob was trading, 60% of what Bob was buying was just a printer with no cartridges. And we know that means Bob is not upselling the cartridges. Bob is not saying, do you want some shoe polish every time you buy a pair of shoes? So Sharon turned around and said to Bob, well, in this scenario, he got to 73. Potentially, you could have got to 100 because you know that you're going to need more, or even higher. You know you need more cartridges than printers. Now, that is going from 0% rebate to 6. What Sharon will have done is put targets along the way. So that 1% rebate was this mix, 2% was this mix. So Bob can just slowly move over. In this scenario, it's a win-win. The only person who has lost, or the business that has lost, was the disruptor putting the cheaper cartridges into the market. We see this so much. I come from construction materials, and it's always the add-ons, which is where all the margin is. So inevitably, it's where the distributors are going to set up shop. In some of these cases, I mean, Bob could have discounted the cartridges as well and still made more money. We talked earlier about complexity and how we don't want things to be too complicated, but likewise, they need to be precise. That is not complicated. For the amount of money involved and the result it delivered, a 6% rebate will be paid if 550,000 units are purchased, of which 73% are in bundles. That was as complicated as that rebate scheme needed to be. The end result, Sharon made 3.7 million more in gross profit, held a margin flat. Bob is a hero. Bob's now sailing around the Caribbean, an extra 10 million to the bottom line. We saw his margin went up to 18%. Sales are up 20% because if you do rebate accounting, you'll know that you have to knock the rebate off of your revenue number. A win-win. So as we start to bring this to a close, the key is in the detail. We know we've got to be precise. Remember this scenario? Why does this happen? This happens because of one detail. It's when we set the target at the end of the year. That's all it is. If we want to avoid that, we have quarterly targets. Doesn't mean you have to pay them, the customer, quarterly or collect the money quarterly. It just means that you could lock in quarter one and you'll get the money at the end of the year. It also means as a buyer, if you have a bad quarter, it doesn't disrupt your whole year. The whole year is not off the table anymore. You can go for it the next quarter, the next quarter. You can make this more complicated. You can have kickers if you do all 4 quarters. So in a world where we know that demand has become a little bit more kind of uncertain, we can increase the frequency of the targets. There's going to be a key word here. We talked about Formula One. We talked about Sharon and Bob. We talked about the rebate rush. Reset. We're really pushing at Enable this idea of just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. What I wasn't told by the marketing team was that reset is just a word, so I actually came up with 5 words for it to help us remember. I got the first word right, which was good, because I wasn't aligned on Andrew's slides whatsoever. Reflect, so as Andrew said, reflect on actually what do we want to achieve? So forget everything you're doing. What does good look like to us? Evaluate, where are we currently? What is currently happening? Strategize, bridge the gap. Where are we? Where do we want to be? What do we need to do to get there? This was the harder one, but I got a word. Engineer. Create the rebates, create your go-to-markets, create how your procurement team are actually going to structure these things. And then finally, I got this word right again, transform. So why do we want to transform? Because, as people have said today, time and time again, a rebate should not be the product of a tough negotiation. It should be the foundation of a partnership. And so for me, I said I want to change the world one rebate at a time. And so I see this as a new chapter in how we deal with rebates. Deanne's making a movement. So many people in this room are making a movement, which is great because it's going to make my job easier to make rebates or make more people love rebates. So we come together, we start working together. So when we think of rebates, structured correctly, rebates are not just a reward. They're a way of saying thank you. They encourage collaboration, and they're a way of sharing success. And so, this is the big moment. You ready, Jonas? I want people to look back at this conference. I want people to think this was the conference when we defined a new chapter for rebates. This was the conference that changed everything. This was the reset. Thank you.